Yesterday, the White House said the media is obsessed with the Russian story. So cut through it. Where is this going today?
Bill, we need to start interviewing witnesses and accessing documents. Those are the two things you need to find out what happened in any fact pattern. So what I would say to my friend from California, Mr. Schiff, give me your list of witnesses. Tell me who you want to talk to. I'll give you mine. Let's get started. Let's focus on the investigation. This week's been about politics. Let's go find facts, and let's do it together.
Well, Adam Schiff appeared about an hour ago, and his target was the head of the Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, the Republican, when he said this, sir.
The events of last week, I think, called that so seriously into question that he really ought to recuse himself, in particular if he's raising an issue about whether members of the transition team were incidentally collected. He was a member of that team, and I think there's a real conflict of interest. So I think it would be in the best interest of the investigation going forward if someone else on the committee were to lead it.
Well, should he or not step down?
Well, you know, of course he shouldn't. Adam was a should not step down. Adam Schiff was a staunch supporter of Secretary Clinton while he was involved in the Benghazi investigation. And he's a staunch supporter of Secretary Clinton even after President Trump won, and nobody's calling on him to recuse himself. Devin is the chairman of House Intel, whether they like it or not. What we need to start doing is focusing on the witnesses and accessing the documents and go find the facts for our fellow citizens. This really should not be a partisan investigation. Let's start meeting with witnesses.
Well, he has said himself, Nunes has said it had nothing to do with Russia. If that's the case, why not clear it up? What's his source? What information was he given on the grounds of the White House? What's wrong with that?
Well, on the source issue, Bill, I found it really interesting last week. Parts of the mainstream media beat the daylights out of Republicans for asking about the source of newspaper articles. And this week, all they want to know is Devin's source. Devin hasn't told me a source. Devin has said, I am protecting my source. What's really important is the information the source provided authentic, credible, and reliable? Whether it's the gardener, the cook, or somebody in the intelligence community, what difference is it who provided it? What matters to me is the information reliable and authentic?
Fox News alert: the Senate Intelligence Committee holding its first public hearing on Russian interference in America's presidential election. With the House's committee investigation stalled, the Senate's GOP chair and Intel's top Democrat say nothing is off limits as they vow to steer clear of politics. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, Meghan McCain, and a couch first-timer Republican strategist and former spokesperson for President George W. Bush, Mercedes Schlapp. Welcome. Good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be out of the swamp.
All right. Much more on that. And, of course, today's #OneLuckyGuy, the co-host of The Five and host of Cashin' In, Eric Bolling. And, by the way, Eric's new book, The Swamp, Washington's Murky Pool of Corruption and Cronyism and How Trump Can Drain It, goes on sale in June. Order yours now. Eric, congrats and welcome back. Always good to have you, but, sir, you need to be reminded that you are outnumbered.
I am outnumbered, but what a great day. There's so much going on, so many stories. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right, let's get right to it. Today's big hearing on Russian meddling, saying they will go wherever the intelligence leads us. Senate Intel Chair Richard Burr and Vice Chair Democrat Mark Warner announcing they will question 20 people over time. Among them, President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who serves as a White House senior advisor, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and possibly former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Meantime, Senator Warner giving a preview of how far Russia's interference went.
If you look, just for example, if you Googled election hacking during the period leading up to the election and immediate afterwards, you wouldn't get Fox or ABC or New York Times. Or what you get is 4 out of the first 5 news stories that popped up were Russian propaganda.
And while both Chairman Burr and Vice Chair Warner pledged to leave politics out of it, a reporter yesterday pressed Burr on whether he can lead a fair and impartial investigation, given his ties to the Trump campaign.
Having served as an advisor on the Trump campaign, can you say hand over heart that you can oversee an impartial and serious investigation?
Absolutely.
Into the ties between the campaign
I'll do something I've never done. I'll admit that I voted for him. But I've got a job in the United States Senate. and I take that job extremely serious.
I have confidence in Richard Burr that we, together with the members of our committee, are going to get to the bottom of this. And that's, if you get nothing else from today, take that statement to the bank.
Of course, as the Republican and the Democrat overseeing this committee, do you think that the Senate committee is going to have more luck than the House committee? Eric Bolling.
Well, I think they may, in that they get to start fresh. So they see some of the mistakes that were made by the House committee. And again, there are 3 investigations going on simultaneously right now. You have the House committee that we talked about with Devin Nunes. You have this one with Burr and Warner. And then you have the FBI investigation that's still ongoing. Here's the big question, though. There are a couple of names out there that are floating. That will the Senate committee call these names to testify? I'm going to throw a name at you. This is circulating right now. It's Evelyn Farkas. Evelyn Farkas was a deputy, let me get this right, the assistant deputy secretary of state. So it's like 3 or 4 levels down at Defense and at State Department. Now, Ellen Farkas has said on air that she knew that the Obama administration was gathering information on the Trump transition team. Why would she know that? She was not in the government at the time when she said this, and she recommended to the Obama administration from outside of government saying, hey, take that information and hide it because when Trump's in office, he may want to get rid of it. There's a lot of problems with that. Number one, if it's an FBI investigation, it should stay in the FBI. If it's intel, it should stay in intel. It's scary that this many people had access to what was being investigated by the FBI.
Mercedes is nodding her head in
agreement.
agreement.
Can I throw one more name at you? Christopher Steele. I know he's a foreigner, but you have to at least call him, try and get him to testify. He's the one with that dossier that was put together. Who paid him to do it?
Well, and there's big questions on the unmasking this information of American citizens being out there. So, for example, there is that false information out there, for example, the House Intelligence Committee, that they're not, that they're stalled, that they're paralyzed. Well, actually, I spoke to some of the committee folks, and they basically said, we're moving forward, we're negotiating on a witness list, we recognize that this has to be a very important investigation, we don't want this to be stalled, but there's been so much political theater around it that it's become problematic.
And when you talk about the politics of it, I want to get to this tweet by Ari Fleischer and go to you on this, Megan, because he acknowledges the fact that we just heard the reporter ask Senator Burr, the Republican leading this committee, if he can do his job since he was for Trump. But no one conveniently asked Senator Warner, the Democrat, if he can do his since he was against Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point, obviously, by Ari Fleischer. I've known Senator Burr a long time. He's completely capable of running this and I think doing a very clean investigation. The problem we have here right now is Eric had to just go through this again for our audience to sort of explain what's going on
Confusing.
and who we should go to. As Mercedes just said, this is completely and utterly politicized on both sides to the point that I have very little faith we're actually going to find any new information out in the future. And I just think, unfortunately, the prism for which you see Donald Trump is how you see this specific issue. And it's really a tragedy because it really could be an extremely egregious scandal on the part of President Obama if he did, in fact, wiretap it, whatever, accidentally collect information on President Trump during the transition of power.
But when you saw both politicians step up there leading the Senate committee yesterday, Harris, you got the impression, and as they said, we're not going to stop till we get this done, that they were together on this. And they're obviously from opposing parties. And they have devoted 7 individuals to this investigation.
We hope so. We hope that some of their actually not incidental but on purpose information gathering includes an Ellis Farkas testimony. And I think you're talking about an interview that just happened because
Morning Joe, Mika, unfortunately,
so I was
Mika
watching
failed
as well,
to follow up
and I don't know if you caught in that interview, she also said that at times she wasn't always comfortable with the level of information gathering that they were doing by the Obama administration and looking at Trump's campaign. That deserves a second look. So as we talk about the people who are going to work together to get to the answers, that's a bigger part of this investigation. Goes to intent and the flavor of that information gathering. I think that's
that she was not at the very top levels of state.
Yeah, but we know that the list of unmasking is big. Right?
And growing.
We know that list is big.
We know now.
We know that there were people who are on there who were necessarily more political than they were investigative. But I want to get to one thing if we can, because I think this will feed into it. So when you look at the bigger issue, it's something that Megan has talked about a lot, and that's that we ought to be focused on whether or not Russia has us in their sights. fights, right? No matter which party. And one of the witnesses today says and intends to tell the Intelligence Committee that Marco Rubio once suffered from Russian efforts as well.
All right.
This is bipartisan.
As Eric mentioned at the top, there's so much to get to, so we want to stay on track here. As Mercedes just mentioned, in the House, the Russia investigation is essentially on hold following days of turmoil surrounding embattled House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes. The committee's ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, plans to meet with Nunes sometime today. He has previously called on the California Republican to step aside from the Russia investigation, but says he hopes today's meeting can essentially right the ship.
This has been, I think, very tough on all of us. This is someone I've worked well with for many years, but I can't overlook if the chairman of our committee is going to freelance in this way. We got a meeting tomorrow, and I hope that we can somehow get back on track. But the chairman is going to have to find a way to lift this cloud. Otherwise, we're going to need someone else to preside over this. I think we really do need someone else to preside over this if we're going to do this credibly.
Meantime, a second Republican congressman following North Carolina's Walter Jones now says he thinks the House investigation has become too politicized. Here's Pennsylvania's Charlie Dent.
I'm not optimistic, just given the tone and the tenor and the various shots being taken by both sides. It sounds to me like they're kind of getting into a stalemate position, a bit paralyzed. The Senate is moving on a better trajectory, and I think we're going to have to rely on the Senate.
All right, so should the Senate lead this thing? Has it become too politicized in the House?
Wow. So Schiff says Nunes should step down because of some things Nunes has done. Don't forget, Adam Schiff is the guy who went on the television and also said that he had not circumstantial evidence. He had direct evidence of a collusion between the Trump administration and the Russians, and then he has since walked it back. So if you want someone to step down, maybe both of them could step down. I don't think either one should. I think Devin Nunes can handle this. But if you're going to do that, take them both down, and then you end up having another Republican GOPer who's going to head the committee. So let's be fair. And if you want to call for someone to step down, I think here's what I think. I think you're going to have three separate investigations, three separate findings, and let's just see what we have. I want to see the evidence.
And I think we need to clarify the situation as well, because there was a source who contacted Chairman Nunes directly, asked him in a guarantee of confidentiality to have this to give this information, this classified information. So that is why Congressman Nunes decided to move forward, speak with the source, and gather this information. However, as Eric, you mentioned, Congressman Schiff went out and started talking about the circumstantial evidence, direct evidence. We don't even have the findings. We're under investigation right now. So I think that the Democrats jumped the gun. I think that Nunes tried to handle the situation with the source, but it got complicated. And that's when it got overheated coverage.
Do you think, Mercedes, it's fair, because I've been asking this all week, that Nunes should have telegraphed out and thought, you know, if I do this on White House grounds and I don't have a good reason, Democrats are going to come after me because we have a target on our backs. I'm talking specifically from the point of view of Republicans. That perhaps that was something that he...
You know, I think he was focused on trying to get the information he needed for this investigation. I think that was his top priority. Unfortunately, you know, the media is going to jump on it and basically say, well, he's a Trump supporter. And, you know, I don't think he necessarily handled it absolutely correctly, but when you're dealing with a source who says, I need to guarantee this confidentiality, you are not going to expose me. Some of these sources come out and they go in public to the congressional hearing, but he had to obtain that information, which was actually very disturbing because it, again, is going after these American citizens in terms of this, in engaging in their conversations.
Megan, can the House get this back on track?
I certainly don't know, but I know what doesn't help. Nunes today in the Weekly Standard said the FBI is not cooperating in his specific request for more information. And I've been saying all last week and all this week that the American public is more than entitled to more transparency on this issue. I don't understand why the FBI isn't helping him get what information that he has seen. And again, to bring, it's just so confusing. Trying to explain this, by the way, to an average person who is not a Politico is borderline impossible. And every day it gets more complicated and more muddled. And I just don't understand why the FBI isn't helping him.
And I think Adam Halsey broke something the other night, and he said that there's some indication that the FBI may have somehow had some contact with this Christopher Steele, the dossier guy from England. But if the FBI paid this guy to put this dossier together, and this Christopher Steele worked for opposition doing research on Trump. There's some really kind of interesting...
is the allegation that the FBI paid him?
Well, actually, it would be untoward if they used opposition research on that.
But here's the point. Remember, they called Comey back to the committee. Nunes called Comey back, and he didn't show up, and that was supposed to happen Monday. Right. So a lot of information may still shed some light on what's going on between the FBI.
We've got to leave it there. A tweet from President Trump getting lots of reaction today. The president vowing to fight Democrats and the House Freedom Caucus when it comes to his agenda. Is he just hurting himself or being the fighter so many of his supporters want? And Vice President Pence and his wife under fire for having a solid marriage based on conservative values. Liberal haters gonna hate, and it's a whole lot of hate. And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. And of course, you can tweet us as well. Eric Bowling is here. I mean, OT baby can go.
We tweet.
All right, see you there.